SB 251 Correa, and item number 11, SB 444 Evans, have both been removed at the author's request. And that will take us to Senator Emerson, which is file item number 5. This is SB 211, the California Global Warming Solutions Act of 2006, and this is relating to tire inflation regulation and enforcement. Senator Emerson, would you like to begin?
Yes. Thank you, Senator and members. This bill seeks to clean up a regulation that was adopted by the California Air Resources Board last September. The mandatory underinflated tire program requires automotive services providers to inflate their customers' tires using a tire pressure gauge that must have an accuracy within the range of 2 psi. Failure to adhere to this new regulation carries criminal penalties. The punishment includes paying a fine of up to $1,000, spending up to 6 months in jail, or both. Obviously, these criminal penalties grossly outweigh the regulated activity. This bill is intended to decriminalize the penalties of this mandatory tire inflation program by replacing these criminal sanctions with civil fines that parallel those of the seatbelt law. Those penalties are $25 fine for the first offense and $50 for each offense thereafter. The second part of the bill will codify the accuracy standards for the air pressure gauges. Presently, the gauges must be accurate within plus or minus 2 psi. This was significant compromise that was reached between the industry and the ARB. By placing these standards into law, we will be assuring that the industry and particularly those particular standards will stay put. Businesses in California need better predictability from our government, and this bill is intended to do that. And I ask for your support on Senate Bill 211. Thank you.
Witnesses in favor. Who would like to begin?
Mike Flanagan on behalf of Les Schwab Tire Centers. In support, the simple fact of the matter is when the Air Resources Board adopted this regulation, they're adopting it under the authority of AB 32. In their heart of hearts, the Air Resources Board probably also doesn't believe there should be criminal sanctions of up to 6 months in jail if somebody misses air pressure by 1 pound. But they are enabled, not allowed to, but adopt and work within the four corners of the enabling legislation, which didn't permit for simple civil fines that Senator Emerson would like to adopt. Ask for your aye vote.
Terry Lavelle with the California Tire Dealers Association. We're the independent and small business tire guys and gals that work up and down the state. We, too, work with the ARB in helping promulgate this regulation, and we had supported the intent of the regulation. But once again, the crime here certainly outweighs any offense as far as the inflation of somebody's tire, and we urge a strong support for this bill.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yes, Jeff Severs on behalf of the Rubber Manufacturers Association, the National Trade Association for all U.S. tire manufacturers, also in strong support.
Hi, Jack Molodanoff on behalf of the Automotive Service Councils of California and the California Auto Body Association, and we're in support of the bill. We feel as though the punishment should fit the crime, and we ask for your aye vote. Thank you.
Any other witnesses in support? Any witnesses in opposition? Mr. Flanagan, thanks for you for stipulating that CARB has a heart.
Hi, Dan Kalb, Union Concerned Scientist. We're not formally in opposition to this bill. We just really have some concerns that we haven't been able to flesh out yet. I do realize this bill is double referred, so we're not objecting to this committee passing this bill out and referring it to the next committee. And we certainly have no objection to the codifying the plus or minus 2 psi, as well as the codification of the fact that the customers, the car owners, would not be penalized in any regard. Only those who violate the service providers would only be subject to penalty, and we certainly support that codification. I'm not quite sure yet if 20 and 50 is really the right number. Possibly, maybe there should be a sunset for this bill for a couple of years as ARB tries to come up with something on their own, or maybe there should be a third level, 20, 50, and 200 if they have an outrageous number of penalties in a year. I don't know. We're willing to talk with the author and others before the next committee, but just some remaining concerns, that's all.
All right. Is there anyone else in opposition? We're going to come back and establish a quorum, so I'd ask the Secretary to go ahead and take a roll.
Senators Desaulniers.
Here.
Desaulniers present. Gaines.
Here.
Gaines present. Harmon.
Here.
Harmon present. Huff. Kehoe. Lowenthal.
Here.
Lowenthal present. Pavley.
Here.
Pavley present. Rubio. Simidian.
Thank you. Senator Emerson, would you like to close?
Yes. When my daughters became driving age,
I'm sorry. Did you have a question, Dr. Lowenthal? I'm sorry. I was trying to ignore you, and I couldn't, so go ahead.
thank you.
Senator Lowenthal, as we like to refer to him as Chair Emeritus here of the
That's
committee. Pearls of wisdom from Chair Emeritus.
Well, I think this is a good first start, but I don't think the bill is quite cooked yet, in that I agree that under the terms that what potentially could happen is way out of line. I don't think it was meant to happen that way. You know, the penalties are much too high, criminal penalties. I don't understand how you arrived at 20 and 50. I think that may be a little low to deter behavior. These are commercial. These are, there has to be some kind of and I don't know how ARB is going to identify those that are not. But obviously, there are a whole host of issues around the enforcement. That's not my concern. I will also sit on the Environmental Quality Committee, so I'm not going to vote on the bill today without prejudice, with the idea that I'd like to see some work on a little bit more realistic fine than $20 and $50. But I think you're moving in the right direction, and I support what you're doing.
Any other? Senator Pavley.
I'll just ditto what Senator Lowenthal said. I also sit on EQ, and the fine struck me as $20 so small since it goes to the station and not the individual that it wouldn't be a deterrent. But conceptually, what your bill's doing
$22.50
seems to be fine. $20.50.
Any other?
Yeah. Well,
Go ahead, Senator.
we took the fines that were based on the seatbelt laws.
Sure, that was to the individual, and we're talking about there is a difference to a commercial establishment. That's not. But I agree with you that what it is now is a little bit outrageous.
All right.
Senator Rubio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't sit on EQ, so I'm going to make a very definitive statement with respect to this bill in this committee, and that is I'm in strong support of it, and I want to thank you for bringing it forward. And clearly, I think there's some work to be done in terms of what the fair amount is. I would agree with Senator Lowenthal. Perhaps we can find a different amount, but I very much appreciate you and your staff's work for bringing it forward today.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Senator Gaines.
Mine is just my comment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mine is more one that's philosophical, just in terms of wouldn't it be in the self-interest of the tire operators, tire shops, to make sure that you had properly inflated tires. There's a liability issue in the event that someone leaves their facility without properly inflated tires. There's also a wear issue in terms of, what you won't get the full life of the tire if it's not properly inflated. So I question why ARB even needs to be engaged in this, because it's in the best interest of the tire distributor to make sure that they're providing those tires at the properly inflated rate. But I appreciate what Senator Emerson's trying to do.
Well,
Thank you.
This would also apply to when you have your car serviced, that your tires are properly inflated at the same time. I think that covers a lot of different areas as well. So.
I think everyone. Senator Huff, did you want to say anything? You're the only committee member who hasn't yet.
Well, trying not to be too inflated over here. So.
We'll leave that for the author. Would you like to close?
I had something to say, but I think I'll just pass and ask for an aye vote.
Okay. The recommendation is to do pass to EQ. Do we have a motion to that effect?
I move the bill.
Okay. Okay. Before we go to that, we actually have to go back and adopt the rules that we're going to operate under
So
this
we can pass it out.
this
Yes.
year. So with that, I need a motion to approve the rules, all right, and the policies. If you could make that one motion, will save us going through it twice. Is that okay, Senator Pavley? All right. So the motion is to approve the rules and the policies for this year. They're very much like last year's. We'll ask the Secretary to call the roll.
Senators Desaulniers?
Aye.
Desaulniers, aye. Gaines? Gaines, aye. Harmon? Huff? Huff, aye. Kehoe? Lowenthal? Lowenthal, aye. Pavley? Pavley, aye. Rubio? Rubio, aye. Semidian.
Okay, thank you. We'll leave that on call, but we do have sufficient to pass that out. So we have a motion on Senator Emerson's bill. Sounds like you've got a little work to do between now and your next stop, but we appreciate what you've done to this point. So the motion is from Senator, who made the motion for Dr. Emerson? Senator Huff. This is to do pass to environmental quality. Secretary to call the roll.
Senators Desaulniers?
Aye.
Desaulniers, aye. Gaines? Gaines, aye. Harmon? Huff? Huff, aye. Kehoe? Lowenthal? Pavley? Rubio? Rubio, aye. Semidian?
We're going to leave that on call. How many votes does the good senator have? 4. You need a couple. He needs 5.
Thank you.
So unless some of us change our mind. Then we'll come back, and if I could have a motion on the consent calendar, since we don't have an author in front of us right now. We have a motion to approve the consent calendar. Oh, I'm sorry, Miss Senator Runner. Let's do the consent, and then we'll take you, Senator Runner, if you wanted to come up. Is there a motion on the consent calendar to approve? Thank you, Senator Pavley. I appreciate that. Any comments on the consent calendar? We'll ask the Secretary to call the roll.
Senators Desaulniers?
Aye.
Desaulniers, aye. Gaines? Gaines, aye. Harmon? Huff? Huff, aye. Kehoe? Lowenthal? Lowenthal, aye. Pavley? Pavley, aye. Rubio? Rubio, aye. Semidian.
We'll leave that open. Has 6 votes sufficient for passage, but we'll leave it open for the members who aren't here. Senator Runner, this is file number 13, SB 720.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members. Currently, California is not one of many states that include military spouses in their policy to automatically renew driver's licenses to cover the length of time that active duty military personnel are absent from our state. SB 720 would extend this benefit to the spouse of the service member. This was brought to me by an active duty serviceman in my district. The provision that would allow the spouses to have automatic renewal would expire 30 days following the discharge date of the service member or when the spouse returns to the state, whichever is earlier. And I'd ask for your aye vote.
Any questions? If Senator Lowenthal.
Question. Now that the military has ended its don't ask, don't tell policy, has repealed that, how do you define spouse?
Well, that's a good question here. I would assume a spouse is anybody who is a partner with the military person there.
Well, I can
Do we need
support
to
that
define that
I'm not asking, I'm
differently?
just asking you. I mean, that it's not you're not using a restrictive definition, you're leaving it general. It could be whatever,
Yes.
however it is. You're not.
Neutral doesn't matter.
Thank you.
A spouse is a spouse, I guess.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Any other questions or comments? Witnesses in support? Any witnesses in opposition? Senator Runner, would you like to close?
Just ask for an aye vote.
Do we have a motion?
Thank you.
Motion is by Senator Gaines. Ask the Secretary to call the roll, please.
The motion is due pass and re-refer to the Committee on Appropriations. Senators Desaulniers?
Aye.
Desaulniers, aye. Gaines? Gaines, aye. Harmon? Huff? Huff, aye. Kehoe? Lowenthal? Lowenthal, aye. Pavley? Pavley, aye. Rubio? Rubio, aye. Semidian.
That has 6 votes, Senator. That's sufficient for passage, but we'll leave it on call for absent members.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay. Senator Lowenthal, would you like to present your bill? Beep, beep, beep. Senator Lowenthal, this is file item 10, SB 341. This is dump trucks and backup alarms. We always like alarms when you're around, Senator Lowenthal.
That's right. Beep, beep, beep. That's it. You know I'm here. And that is the issue, to know that I'm here.
It's not loud enough.
Mr. Chair, SB 341 requires that commercial vehicles with a gross vehicle weight of over 14,000 pounds that transport materials to or from a construction site or a mine site, that they be equipped with an automatic backup alarm. Backup alarms are inexpensive, as the analysis points out. After checking, they're usually less than $150, and they can be quickly installed in one day or less. State and federal occupational safety law requires backup alarms at aggregate and construction sites, or Cal OSHA requires it as part of regulations on sites. However, there's no requirement in the vehicle code, which has led to some inconsistency and confusion. What SB 341 does is just fill in that safety gap in existing law and make existing law consistent with what is already regulatory. I ask for there's no opposition to this. I have witnesses in support. I ask for your aye vote.
Witnesses in support.
Charlie Ray with the California Construction and Industrial Materials Association. We're the sponsor of the bill. We represent producers of aggregates, ready-mix concrete, industrial minerals, and I think the Senator summarized the bill perfectly. This solves a gap in current safety law. We appreciate your support.
Brooks Ellison on behalf of the California Dump Truck Owners Association in support.
Thanks, Brooks. Other witnesses in support.
Mike Kurgis. I am the safety manager for Granite Rock. We strongly support this bill in that we have both mining and construction activities, as well as a fleet of ready-mix trucks and aggregate transportation vehicles. We support the bill from the standpoint that there is a gap in the law right now with regard to the absence of backup alarms being a requirement as part of the bid inspections, as part of the random inspections on the roads by the CHP, and this bill will definitely fill that gap and provide that means. We had a fatality at one of our construction sites in 2006 where the member of our crew was working at the back of his roller when a dump truck without a working backup alarm backed into him and killed him. And with that said, I think that from a safety perspective and from my position as a safety professional, I think this bill will do a lot to help that.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, I'm Angela Driscoll with Vulcan Materials Company. We are the nation's largest aggregate producer with 39 facilities here in California, and we are also in support of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support? Any witnesses in opposition? Seeing no one, are there any comments or questions from the committee? Senator Huff.
I think the intent of the bill is good. I've just got a question here. So how is the CHP supposed to know whether the vehicle is used to transport material to and from construction and mining sites?
We're talking about large trucks, right, that are over 14,000, and when they go through that biennial bit inspection, which is really the time, it is listed at that time whether they go to construction sites or if they do any kind of mining activity.
So it spells out what
right on
is.
what they do at that time.
So
they will know, or we can ask them to. These are only large trucks. We're really that engage in this that is already required in regulations and for safety purposes. And we can, if there is not that clear identification, since now once we pass this as part of the vehicle code, this will be part of that every 2 years inspection that they have to go through anyway for those trucks that are over 14,000 pounds. We can deal with that issue.
Yeah, I would like you to take a look at that.
We certainly will, as it goes forward, take a look at that. Because again, we're not trying to make it more difficult for anybody. This should be there. You know, there have been serious injuries. Right. People are not paying. You know, they think that when the trucks are backing up that they're going to have, because almost everyone knows that's what Cal OSHA. Those are federal laws, state laws. And there are numbers of trucks that don't have it because it's not required. We don't inspect for it as
No, and I
part
think
of
the
it.
idea of inspecting for it because it is required.
But I will work
Makes
with your
sense.
office to make
Okay.
sure that that is not an owner, if this bill moves forward, not an owner's requirement.
I have no doubt this bill will move forward.
Thank you. And I have no doubt, I hope that I will have your support as it moves forward.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Would you, it's an alarmingly good bill, Mr. Senator Lowenthal. Would you like to close?
I could not top that, Mr. Chair. I urge your aye vote.
Okay. We need a motion to do pass. The recommendation is do pass to appropriations. Is there a motion? Thank you, Senator Huff. I'll ask the Secretary to call a roll.
Senators Desaulniers?
Aye.
Desaulniers, aye. Gaines?
Aye.
Gaines, aye. Harmon? Huff? Huff, aye. Kehoe? Lowenthal?
Aye.
Lowenthal, aye. Pavley? Pavley, aye. Rubio?
Aye.
Rubio, aye. Simitian.
That's 6 votes. That's sufficient for passage. Thank you, Senator Lowenthal. We will put it on call for the absent members, and the sergeants are busily rounding up authors. So we'll sit tight for a few moments while we wait for Senator Simitian. Senator Kehoe is going to present for Senator Corbett, Senator Leno, and Senator Correa.
Let the record reflect, with the previous chair, we didn't have quiet times.
Well, this chair is going to have timeouts. Do you want to go in timeout, Alan and Bob?
As a matter of fact, I would like a timeout.
Well, there are a lot of people around here who would like to put you in timeout, but not me. As someone who spent most of my career in timeout, I don't know. You started it, Dr. Lowenthal. Senator Simitian, delightful to see you. We'd like to start with file item number 2, SB 28.
I would. Thank you.
An issue new to you.
Yes, thank you very much. Mr. Chairman and members, this is SB 28. It is designed to improve a good law that is working well but could work that much better. Members will recall that in 2006, California passed a hands-free cell phone law that I authored, which took effect then on July 1st of 2008. What we wanted to do was wait then and see what kind of results we had after we had a year of good data that we could rely on, and that data was for 2008-2009, wasn't actually certified until 2010. That's why last year I brought a bill quite similar to this one to the committee. And the bill is designed essentially to do 2 or 3 things. It takes the existing base fine, which is $20 for a first offense, and increases it to $50. Now, I should point out that is still appreciably less than the standard fine for most vehicle code violations. If you litter on the highway, the base fine is $100. If you drive in the carpool lane without the sufficient number of folks in the car, the base fine is $100. If you drive with someone in the trunk of your car, the base fine is $100. I'm not asking for $100. I'm asking for something half that amount in the hopes that a more significant deterrent will improve the level of compliance. That's the first thing the bill does in an effort to increase compliance. Second, we also have a point on the driver's license, but this is a change from last year, remember. This was probably the toughest sticking point we had last year. The bill now says that the point on the driver's license will be only for a second and subsequent offense. And when I took that amendment last year, that removed all opposition that we had to the bill at that point. So if you simply forget, you make a mistake in a moment, you grab the phone, first offense, the base fine would be $50 rather than $20, still half of what the standard base fine is. point on the driver's license, but only for second and subsequent offenses. And then the third significant change in the law is that a drafting error in the original version in 2006 meant that the law that's on the books today does not apply to bicyclists who are out on the highway using the road. So ordinarily the vehicle code applies. You're supposed to stop at the stop sign. You're supposed to go the right way on a one-way street. In this case, because the language of the original legislation referenced motor vehicles, the determination was it didn't apply to cyclists. The agreement we reached last year, and I thank former Chairman Lowenthal, was, all right, we want bicyclists to comply. We want them to be subject to the law. But let's just say a $20 fine for a first offense with no additional fees or penalties added on, so that that really is the total of the fine, not something steeper. The law in its first year, members, produced gratifying results. In 2008-9, in the first year after the law was in effect, we saw a 20% decrease in the number of fatalities on California highways. We saw a 20% decrease in the number of collisions. We checked to see if that 20% decrease was compared to the past 3-year annual average. It was. We went back another 5 years and said, is it compared to the annual average over 5 years? It was. We looked at the reduction in collisions over a 20-year period, and there had never been a year-to-year reduction in the number of collisions like we saw in the immediate aftermath of the bill passing. We know, however, that only 60 to 70% of the public is complying. Not bad for the first year or two, but we could do better. My hope and expectation is that these additional incentives in terms of slightly higher penalty and a point for a second and subsequent offense will be the additional increment that we need for even greater compliance, even more lives saved, even more collisions avoided. I would respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Witnesses in support. Mr.
Mike
Flanagan.
Flanagan on behalf of Verizon Wireless, in strong support. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members, Eduardo Martinez with Carter Wetch & Associates on behalf of the Metropolitan Transportation Commission in support. We thank the Senator for his leadership on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Eduardo. Any other witnesses in support?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, James Lombardo on behalf of the California Association of Bicycle Organizations, and we're in support.
Thank you. Any witnesses in opposition?
Reluctantly, Mr. Chair and members, Matt Gray on behalf of Taxpayers for Improving Public Safety. Never thought I'd be opposing a Senator Simitian bill. But,
first for everything.
In concept, we get where the Senator is going with this, and we think if he had stuck with his original proposal to actually ban all use of cell phones, hands-free or hands-on, that it would be a true improvement to public safety. We hope that the legislature will see fit to actually go in that direction. There can be no misunderstanding the statistics if you understand, if you get them from, well, the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, which is essentially the underwriter laboratory for roadway safety, has very conclusively shown in looking at both California and a number of other states with these cell phone laws and normed them against other jurisdictions without the cell phone laws. And as you can see by this statistic, not only did the rates for California drop, you have the same peaks and the same valleys and the same drops in California and states with the cell phone bans and the states without the cell phone ban. This is a nationwide trend. It's largely, you can't just look at CHP data. CHP is not, they're not academics, they're not statisticians, their methodologies would not withstand scrutiny, and when you actually look at the researchers and what the research says, the fatalities are going down, the collisions are going down because of a number of indicators, and cell phone usage has dropped in all these jurisdictions, and the trend has remained constant throughout. What they have conclusively found is, consistently throughout, in all these studies, it doesn't matter if you use hands-free, it doesn't matter if you use hands-on. It is the discussion that distracts the drivers. When you're talking to the IRS and they suddenly tell you, we're going to audit the last 6 years of returns, that's what distracts you.
Sort of ironic, given who you represent. Has that happened to you? Never mind.
And so, with all due respect, we regretfully ask for your opposition to this bill at this time. We hope to continue to work with Senator Simitian to make this a stronger bill and truly improve public safety, which I think is all of our interest. Thank you.
You've given Senator Simitian a bill idea. not allowing the IRS to call on your cell phone in California. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Eileen Okerblom, and I live in Santa Maria. I'm here today because my 19-year-old son, Eric, was killed by a texting driver. I oppose Senate Bill 48 because I think the bill needs to be stronger. I think the proposed penalties for handheld cell phone use and texting while driving are inadequate, and the penalties need to be increased to the level that is congruent with the deadly behaviors. Eric had just finished his first year at UC Berkeley, majoring in molecular biology, and was home for the summer of 2009. He went out for his routine bicycle ride in preparation for joining the Berkeley cycling team when he returned to school in the fall. Eric was riding on a straight, unobstructed road in broad daylight and in direct line of sight of any driver for approximately 45 seconds. He was struck from behind by a truck traveling 60 miles per hour. The driver denied any distractions. The court-ordered phone records reveal the driver was sending and receiving text messages at the time Eric was hit and killed. Scientific research studies indicate texting while driving increases the risk of a crash by 23 times. This is almost 6 times more than drunk driving. The average amount of time a driver takes their eyes off the road while texting is 5 seconds. In 5 seconds, at 60 miles per hour, a vehicle, a 4,000-pound piece of metal and glass, will travel the distance of a football field with a blindfolded navigator. Scientific research studies also indicate using a handheld cell phone increases the risk of a crash by 400% and is the equivalent of driving drunk. Many scientific studies indicate it's more dangerous than driving drunk because reaction time is slower. 86% of teens admit to texting while driving. 63% of the nation's licensed drivers say they use a cell phone behind the wheel. Since texting has been banned in California, initially the number of people texting behind the wheel did decrease, but now it's doubled. The number of cell phone users behind the wheel has stayed about the same. Increasing the penalties from $20 to $50 and $50 to $100 with a point for the second offense is grossly inadequate as a deterrent. The penalties for the 2 deadliest behaviors while driving must be increased to at least the equivalent of DUI penalties. Texting is almost 6 times more deadly than drunk driving, and handheld cell phone the equivalent of drunk driving, and many studies show it creates more impairment. In California, if you park illegally in a handicap space, the first citation has a base fee of $250. And with all other fees included, the cost will be $1,080.50. In California, the first DUI will cost $3,506. 2 points, loss of driver's license for 6 months to 1 year, DUI school for 12 to 45 hours, mandatory jail time from 4 days to 6 months, and 3 to 5 years of probation. The penalty needs to be at least equivalent with DUI penalties. The cell drunk is now a greater risk to everyone on the road than drunk drivers. Everyone here and everyone you love is at risk. My son was an innocent victim. Everyone has a phone, and they think they can use it behind the wheel, and they cannot, and they will not stop until the penalties are as great as DUI penalties. The penalties need to be a serious deterrent. They need to fit the crime. This is my 19-year-old son. Brilliant. The most kind, gentle, compassionate person you could ever know. He was a 7-time varsity letterman. He was a musician. He was an artist. And most of all, he was humble and grateful. And he didn't need to die that day. So I think the law needs to be much tougher than what it is. I commend Senator Simitian for his work and I realize that he's trying to introduce the penalties incrementally, so he has a chance of getting it passed. But I think that we really need to look at this scientific data. It's evidence-based, and it needs to have more serious penalties.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. And I'm sure all my colleagues want to send a message that we are very sorry for your very incredible loss.
Thank you.
Any other witnesses in opposition?
Mr. Chair, may I indulge the...
just for a moment, sure.
Two quick examples of if this bill moves forward where we really need to fix the law. We're interested in public safety here. The way the law is written is if you are lawfully stopped at a traffic control device, a red light, and you're texting, there's no threat to public safety, right? But you are guilty under this law. If you are lawfully stopped and parked with the engine off on the side of the road in a parking space, but your key is in the ignition, you are guilty under this law, and there's no credible public safety threat. There are some things that need to be tightened up in this law if we're going to keep it the way it is and not ban it outright.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Any other witnesses in opposition? Seeing no one, committee members? Senator Huff and then Senator Gaines.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Senator submitting a base fine of $50 translates into what?
It will be, excuse me, the total number will vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction because, as the testimony has indicated, there are fines and penalties that are added on to the base fine. But I think we're looking at $50, I'm going to confirm with my staff, in the low 200s in terms of, say again? 250 would be a typical fine. Right now, you're looking at something more like $135 as the total for a first offense on a $20 base fine. I looked at committee staff. Again, I want to be very clear. These numbers vary from county to county because the fines and penalties that are added on vary by jurisdiction.
It's on page 2 of the analysis in the second bullet under this bill. Gives you the total numbers. Increases the base fine from $20 to $208 total bail to $50, $328 total bail for the first offense.
Our experience is that the numbers are somewhat lower than that, Mr. Chairman. I'll just let go with that.
I would just offer my suggestion, as I have the last couple times this has come up in its various iterations. I think that's pretty strong. Certainly, if it was $135, that would get my attention, and the other just seems almost, punitive. Last year, I quoted the same statistics that the witness did about the, from wherever it was, from the insurance guys, the insurance underwriters. And I know you have a response to that, but the data is still the data. It dips and it goes up and down at the same level, whether you have the hands-free law enacted or not. And so, yes, everything is coming down. Our cars are safer. I can't say that our drivers are educated that much better, but I do believe that we are controlling fatalities and accidents, and they don't show any statistical increase in accidents over states like California with these hands-free law versus the states that do not have them. And then moving on to bicycles, that's a whole nother area, and I understand this doesn't have the multiplier on the bikes, but I don't think the Highway Patrol are keeping track of those accidents either, are they? Does anybody keep track of bicycle accidents that have the person's been texting?
I don't have that data, and I'm not aware if it's being collected. So.
Yeah, I don't believe it. So you listed some other offenses that bicycles routinely engage in, driving on the wrong side of the road. They drive in various manners, often because they have young people that don't even have driver's license that are driving. And it just seems like for bicyclists that also is a pretty, not just a heavy fine. I appreciate it doesn't have the extra on top of it, but it seems almost an unenforceable fine. And you have a lot of rural areas where, the bike is the only person on the road, and yet, you've been making a criminal out of perhaps a kid who doesn't have a license to verify his identification in the first place. But I guess I can follow the kid home and nail him with a parent. But I have not been a fan of this in the past. I know that texting and driving can be a problem. but we already have laws in the books about distracted driving. And, if you're worried about driving with your knee while eating your sandwich and you can't take a phone call or text message because you might be sighted, that could be a problem. I'm using a little hyperbole, obviously, but I've seen all kinds of forms in my years as a commuter, from putting on makeup to reading papers to reading books to putting on nail polish, all the kinds of things that distract drivers in cars, and certainly texting or being on a cell phone are those. I think that the witness also brought up some good illustrations of problems with the law that I would certainly like to see cleaned up, whether at a stoplight where somebody can do a text at that point where they're not posing danger to somebody else. Also, just holding it in your hand as a speakerphone. People feel they're being, compliant there, but they're not. They're still using, even if it is on speaker, and so they're in violation. And I guess because of the way it's worded, perhaps even our state's Motorola ones, where we have to push a little green button on the dash to accept a call coming in as opposed to just speaking a voice command, we could be out of compliance by pushing a green button to turn on a call and a red button for turning it off. But regardless, I won't be supporting your bill today, but those are some concerns I have.
Senator Gaines.
Yeah, thank you. I was again looking at the analysis that showed what the total bail was under the current law at $20, and it's showing a number of 208. Now, I don't know if that's an average, because that could probably vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction throughout the state. And then it's showing at $50 that the total bail would be $328. So I guess from my perspective, that's going to certainly capture my attention if I ended up paying $208 for violating the law. It certainly did in my speeding violation that I had on Thanksgiving morning on I-80. And what I thought would be maybe $200 ended up being $570 by the time I got finished paying all the fees to local jurisdictions and such. So I guess from my perspective, I think it's not really a $20 fine. It's more like a couple $100, and I think that's a big deterrent.
You care to respond, Senator?
Sure.
Any other comments or questions?
I was going to say, if you'd like me to fold this into a close, I'm happy to.
That would be great.
Mr. Chairman, a couple of quick observations and corrections, if I may. First, on the Insurance Institute study that was cited, we did have this conversation last year. The study that was cited doesn't talk about fatalities, doesn't look at collisions. It's an insurance study that looks at claims between and among different states. And in fact, it doesn't even look at all the claims. It looks at only the claims on late model, high value vehicles. So it is not representative of what actually happens on the highway here in California. We have the data about what happens here in California. You may think that it is coincidental that in the year after we passed the law, we had the single greatest reduction in collisions in the 20 years for which we've analyzed data. But that strikes me as unlikely. By a factor of twofold over any previous year in the previous 20 years, we saw a reduction unmatched in previous recessions, under previous circumstances, with previous improvements. We know that there are more drivers on the highway today than there were when I started down this path in 2001. They are vastly more likely to be using cell phones as the cost of cell phones has gone down. And yet with more drivers driving more miles cumulatively with more cell phones, we were able to reduce fatalities by 20%. Now let's put that in real and human terms. 700 fewer fatalities in a year. That means that every single day, a couple of people are going to go home and sit down with their families for dinner who otherwise wouldn't have made it through the day. I think that is worth a moment of care and caution. Question about whether $20 or $50 is the right number. I want to reemphasize something I said earlier. I'm asking for a base fine that is half the level of a base fine for other garden variety traffic violations. As you heard from one of our witnesses, many are much higher. But it does need to be a more significant amount if we're going to go from 60-70% compliance to the 90% compliance that we have today for seat belts. We know we can save lives. And the frustrating thing to me, members, is, I know there's nothing flashy about highway safety, but when I started on this in 2006 with the successful vehicle that was finally passed and signed into law, one of the things I did was I looked around and said, what are the other things where people lose their lives? And if you looked at the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, close to 100 Californians lost their life that year in service to their country. And we were appropriately saddened. And if you look at the number of fires around the state, more than 250 people lost their lives. And those were tragedies that were on the news. And if you looked at homicides, for people who care about crime in the community, there were close to 2,500 homicides in that year of 2006. But when you asked yourself, what about traffic fatalities? There were more than 4,000 people who lost their lives in California highways that year, and we act like that's acceptable and like there's nothing we can do about it. And it isn't acceptable, and there is something we can do about it, and we've done it. And we've saved lives, and we've reduced the number of collisions. But we can do a better job, and we can save more lives, and we can reduce the number of collisions to an even greater degree. The studies are just that. They're studies. But there isn't a study in the world that says you're safer having a distracting conversation while you're clutching a cell phone to your ear than you are to have both hands free to be on the wheel. The PPIC study, Public Policy Institute of California, that we all know and respect, I think, calculated based on their analysis of other states that we'd see 300 to 900 fewer fatalities here in California as a result of the law. Guess what? Our 700 fewer fatalities was right in that range. You heard support from the cell phone industry today. You heard support from MTC. You heard support from the bicycle community, who are, by the way, among the most vulnerable out there on the road when people are distracted. With all that, I would request an aye vote.
Thank you, Senator Smitty. And I just want to thank you for bringing it. I appreciate the testimony. It's hard not to talk to a police officer or traffic officer who doesn't feel that this is the least we should be doing from what they see day to day. So with that, we need a motion to do pass to appropriations. Senator Lowenthal moves the bill. We'll ask the Secretary to call the roll.
Senators Desaulniers?
Aye.
Desaulniers, aye. Gaines?
No.
Gaines, no. Harmon? Huff? No. Huff, no. Kehoe? Lowenthal? Kehoe, aye. Lowenthal? Aye. Lowenthal, aye. Pavley? Pavley, aye. Rubio? Aye. Rubio, aye. Simidian?
Aye.
Simidian, aye.
That's 6-2, Senator. That's sufficient for passage, but we'll leave it open for absent members, which will take us to your second item. This is file item number 3, SB 29. This is related to vehicles and automated traffic enforcement systems, one of our former chair's most favorite topics.
Thank you. Members, this is the red light camera bill, and on this one, I don't know where Senator Huff will be this year, but last year he was kind enough to be the co-author on the bill that moved out of this committee. It was substantially amended in order to address concerns over in the Assembly side. In the Assembly Transportation Committee, I worked there with Chair Bonnie Lowenthal and her staff. My thanks to them. We got a bill at the end of the year that had no opposition when we finally got done with it. We had worked closely with the Police Chiefs Association and with the League of California Cities. As of 2 o'clock today, we've confirmed there is no opposition to the bill. We have got a bill in front of you that still allows folks to use red light cameras if they wish to, but it provides some due process protections. And this bill came to me from a constituent, by the way, who got 3, 4, 5 tickets, at least 3, from Southern California for a car she didn't own that was a different model with a different license plate number and a picture of someone who clearly wasn't her, but nonetheless she got the ticket and had to go through quite a process, as you can imagine, to untangle herself from law enforcement at the other end of the state. As we looked at this process, the conclusion we came to was that there were larger systemic fixes that are necessary. The bill provides for signage, clarifies what's required to operate a red light camera, calls out the fact that cameras cannot be used for revenue generation, must only be used where there's a finding of fact that safety is the criteria, specifically requires that the owner of a vehicle that has been alleged to commit a violation is informed that they are not obliged to incriminate themselves or identify somebody else whose picture may be there. Believe it or not, some of the contractors have sent out forms saying, if you don't tell us who that person is, then you're going to get the ticket, even if it's clearly not you. And that raises obvious concerns about due process and the rights of motorists under California state law. Requires a ticket to contain vendor viewing and contact information, and requires a pre-ticket contact, meaning somebody you can talk to untangle the maze if you get caught up in this process. No opposition to the bill to my knowledge, and I would respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Okay. Any witnesses in support? Witnesses in opposition? Questions or comments from committee members? Senator Rubio.
Senator Simitian, at the local level, what is I was looking at the bill, the finding of facts that the local agencies will have to provide before they install the red light camera?
Well, that will vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction and from case to case. But as you may recall, I know you and I share a history in local government. Certain land use decisions, for example, you make based on findings of fact. So is there evidence in the record sufficient for a local city council to determine that there is, in fact, a safety concern there? I should say I think it's a modest standard. As you will recall from your local government experience, the courts are very, very unlikely to overturn the legislative discretion of a local council or board of supervisors. But the clear requirement of the bill is, number one, it can't be about revenue generation. And number two, the council has to stop and ask itself, or board in unincorporated areas, has to stop and ask itself, all right, is there a safety concern here? If so, what evidence do we have in the record? And then adopt findings of fact that say, we're doing this because we believe there's a legitimate safety concern.
It is my recollection at the local level that I find I have some reservations, and that's the reason why I asked that question. We had a number of accidents, and the finding of fact to use a certain pot of money to install stoplights was 5 accidents in one calendar year. Unfortunately, we had 4, and then December 31st came. The following year, 2 months later, we had then another accident, and we had to wait until there were 4 more. I mean, there are some. I don't want to fall into that trap.
We do not call out in the bill what the findings of fact must be, what's sufficient. You will recall that the standard, absent a specific requirement like that, is has the legislative body acted in a fashion that is arbitrary or capricious. Under California state law, case law, judicial deference to local government legislative action, absent a determination that there has been a decision that is either arbitrary or capricious, the court defers to the legislative judgment of the local legislative body.
That's right. Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Simitian, would you like to close, or was that your close? And the motion will include you accepting the technical amendments.
That's correct, with my thanks to your staff.
Okay.
Ask for an aye vote.
Appreciate that, and I will say that I was amazed to get a notice from one of my son's cars that he was from New York, and it was amazing that he could drive to New York and back to the Bay Area in one day. So, but it was a pain getting through it all.
Okay.
He takes after his father. He's very cautious. So we need a motion due pass to appropriations. That's Senator Pavley made the motion. I'll ask the Secretary to call the roll.
The motions do pass as amended.
And this is the red light camera bill, Mr. Chairman, yes?
Yes.
Thank you.
Senators Desaulniers?
Aye.
Desaulniers, aye. Gaines? Aye. Gaines, aye. Harmon? Aye. Harmon, aye. Huff? Huff, aye. Kehoe? Aye. Kehoe, aye. Lowenthal? Aye. Lowenthal, aye. Pavley? Pavley, aye. Rubio? Aye. Rubio, aye. Simitian?
Aye.
Simitian, aye.
9-0. That's obviously sufficient for passage. We'll leave it on call.
No, it's out.
Oh, it's out. I'm sorry.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you,
Thank
Senator
you,
Simitian. Senator Kehoe, you have 2. One you're presenting for Senator Corbett, SB 209, which is file item 4, and then your own item number 14, which is SB 730, in whatever order you would prefer.
We'll go in file order. Take
Okay.
Senator Corbett's item. This is on electric vehicles, 209.
Go ahead. Would
Thank
like
you,
to
Mr.
present?
Chairman. And members, presenting on behalf of Senator Corbett, I'd like to accept the committee's amendments as author's amendments. They're at the top of page 3 of the analysis.
Thank you.
All righty. This bill facilitates the development of electric vehicle charging infrastructure by allowing electric vehicle owners to install an electric vehicle charger station without hindrance at common interest developments, or commonly known as condos. With electric vehicles continuing market expansion, homeowners need to have an opportunity to install EV chargers at common interest developments. The bill ensures that any challenges to installing electric vehicle chargers at CIDs are met in much the same way. We now have laws prohibiting common interest development from not allowing the installation of solar panels. So we want a general rule. Senator Corbett continues to work with stakeholders on addressing the concerns to the process. The bill is supported by Plug-in America, Natural Resources Defense Council, and the Alliance of Automobile Manufacturers Bay Area Air Quality Management District, Union of Concerned Scientists, and the South Coast Air Quality Management District. I have Kathy Lynch and members of Plug-in America here to testify.
Okay, witnesses in
Ask for your
support.
eyeball.
Go ahead, sir.
Hi, I'm Mark Geller from Plug-in America. We represent current and future consumers of plug-in electric vehicles. State policies obviously call for lowering the emissions from vehicles and the petroleum use in the state. Plug-in cars will play a very big role in this policy. We support this bill because we believe that no unreasonable restrictions should be placed on folks who live in multi-dwelling units and condos. No unreasonable restrictions should be placed upon them for getting plug-in electric vehicles. This isn't rocket science. Therefore, we support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Other witnesses in support.
Eileen Tutt, the Executive Director of the California Electric Transportation Coalition. We've been working with the Senator. We have one small amendment, so we're supportive amended, but it's essentially a clarification amendment, and we are very supportive of Senator Corbett's efforts. Thank you.
I'll tell her.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
She's getting a root canal right now, Sonia.
And members, Carrie Mazzoni for the Executive Council of Homeowners representing Common Interest Developments. We have a supportive amended. We have not filed a letter. We've been working closely with the author's office and are very pleased with the progress that we've made, and just wanted to let you know we think we're going to get there.
Mr. Urban, this is in support of the bill.
Correct. It's disorienting, isn't it?
It is. You're supporting Senator Corbett. Actually, I'm going to change my recommendation. Go ahead.
I do disorient. No. Gene Herman, on behalf of the Alliance of Automobile Manufacturers, we support this measure. We think it's a sound step forward. Thank you.
Very good. You had difficulty saying that, but see, anything's possible.
Skip Dahm on behalf of the Community Associations Institute. As introduced, we had severe problems with the measure simply because there's a difference between policy and how it's implemented. And as it relates to the ownership of the device, who installs it, who pays for it, who gets insurance, et cetera. Those issues have been resolved, and we appreciate the author's willingness to work with us on that. There are a couple of remaining issues, like who is responsible for it if the unit is foreclosed upon or the owner leaves the unit, and who would pay for that removal. I think that's been addressed, but still needs some working on it. So we're probably going to be in good support of the bill once that's resolved. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support?
Dan Cobb, Union Concerned Scientists. We urge support for the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Jennifer Watt, on behalf of the California Association of Community Managers, we support the objective of the bill and would like to thank the author for working with us on amendments going forward.
Thank you. Any witnesses in opposition? Seeing no one, any comments or questions from the committee? All right, there's motion to do pass to appropriations as amended. Okay, it's do pass as amended, not to approps. Senator Keogh, would you like to close so you have an excuse to leave, Mr. Urban? Okay.
That's your eyeball.
With that, we will ask the Secretary to call a roll.
Thank you.
The motion is do pass as amended. Senators Desaulniers.
Aye.
Desaulniers, aye. Gaines. No. Gaines, no. Harmon. Huff. Kehoe.
Aye.
Kehoe, aye. Lowenthal. Aye. Lowenthal, aye. Pavley. Aye. Pavley, aye. Rubio. Aye. Rubio, aye. Simidian. Aye. Simidian, aye.
All right, we'll leave that on call with sufficient votes for passage, I do believe. And we'll leave it on call for Senator Huff when he comes back. Senator Kehoe, would you like to do your bill?
This is SB 730. This is my bill. It's also has to do with charging installation for electric vehicles. Before I begin, there's some suggested amendments on page 4 of the analysis that I'd like to accept. I accept the amendments that will require electric vehicle permits to be approved within 24 hours starting July 1, 2012, no longer requiring cities and counties to provide an online process for to achieve this. And then second, to clarify on page 6 of the bill, lines 19 through 27, that the California Energy Commission funding is made available to cities and counties who wish to take the next step of creating an expedited online EV permit.
Thank you, Senator Keogh. Thanks for working with us on the bill and the amendments.
We appreciate your help. Thank you.
Thanks. Witnesses in support.
Could I just make
Sure.
one comment? This bill continues to facilitate this transition to plug-in electric vehicles. I want you all to know that San Diego is the site of a special program, collaboration between San Diego Gas and Electric, Nissan Leaf, and Ecotality to do installs down there for chargers. But what's not so widely known is that charging equipment installed and approved can sometimes take several weeks. We want to shorten that up so a new owner doesn't have to wait weeks and weeks before he or she can charge their car at their residence. The bill addresses some of these issues by requiring jurisdictions that have a permit for an electric vehicle charging station to approve the permit within 24 hours and to execute an inspection within 7 working days. And also, the bill requires the California Energy Commission to provide incentive funding for cities and counties who seek that funding, an expedited online EV permit application. So we're trying to help the cities get to an online application by using the CEC funds, and I ask for your aye vote. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sorry if I interrupted. Witnesses in support.
Yes, Mark Geller from Plug-in America. We fully support expediting the permitting requirements for electric vehicle infrastructure. There's really no reason that this should take more than 24 or 48 hours, and appreciate the bill by the senator. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Tuck.
Eileen Tutt, California Electric Transportation Coalition. To follow the theme from the last time I testified, we have been working very closely with the senator. I'm also representing Nissan with regards to this particular bill. We have some concerns, but the senator has been very flexible. We agree with Senator Kehoe that this is probably one of the #1 barriers to electric vehicles is this delayed installation for infrastructure. So we'd like to continue to work with her, but in general, we definitely support the concept and will continue to support if amended.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support? If not, witnesses in opposition?
Hello.
Good afternoon, Kiara Ross on behalf of the League of California Cities.
It's not on. You need to push the button. Thank you very much.
There we go. Sorry about that.
We always want to hear every pearl of wisdom from the California League of Cities.
Thanks very much. We unfortunately still remain opposed to the bill, although we are very thankful for the amendments that she has taken today. Our concern on the 24-hour turnaround on this bill is that we still have many cities, especially our smaller and more rural communities in California, that do not have a significant amount of staff that our larger communities have. It's still going to be very difficult for them to meet a 24-hour mandate. The bill states that it's a 24-hour turnaround from the time of receipt of the permit. Most of our building departments are not open on Saturdays and Sundays, and many of our city halls are actually closed on Fridays due to furloughs. So that 24-hour turnaround is still very difficult. And in many cases, in smaller communities, your building department officials are your city clerks, and they run 2 or 3 or 4 jobs. And so while we don't have opposition to the notion of trying to work on infrastructure for electric vehicles, and we have actually been working very closely with our utilities and others in California, we need to make this workable for our communities in a time when they're already facing very severe fiscal constraint. Thank you.
Perhaps we can clarify. I think the intention was business days.
Yes, it
Senator
is
Kehoe.
working days, but I see that's not in the bill. And the inspection is after the completion of the work with the 7-day time limit kick in.
Right. That would actually help a lot.
Oh, we're happy to do that. And if I may, not to say that the influx of electric vehicles will only be in urban areas, but I think the larger jurisdictions are going to have more to deal with and would be capable of doing the online expediting. And that's where we'll see the bulk of the purchases for EVs. But we'll continue to work with you on those issues.
Senator Lowenthal had a starring role in Who Killed the Electric Car. Would like to speak on this item.
Yeah, I was on the right side of that issue.
Yes, you were.
That was a number of years ago. Just so I understand it, the 24 hours is it's on the website and hopefully of what by the city in terms of what the conditions would be for a permit, and that and the city would issue a conditional permit, I believe, within that 24 hours to be the final approval to be done within 7 days after the completion of the project. Is that not the process? They don't come out and do an inspection
No, not at
within
that
the first.
time.
So the idea that, as you pointed out, that they're short-staffed, they're not going out and doing any inspection right away for the initial conditional. They're allowing that work to go forth, and then they're doing the final approval or not of that work within 7 days after the completion. Is that not true?
That's true. If I
So
could
what's
add
the
a couple
problem?
comments. Where the complexity on these, as I understand it, comes into play is that it deals with your electric system in your house, or sort of the system that you have in place. Some cases, when the electrician does the work on the house initially, when they go in to figure out what your system can hold and what you can do in your house, when you bring that permit to the building department, your building official will look at it, and they may have a number of questions about your system. And one of those questions is about the load that this new electric charger will have on the load of your house or your street. And if that load, and that's dependent on the National Electric Code, that they have to do a calculation to figure out the load. If that load is not sufficient to be met by your existing infrastructure, that permit has to go out to the utility. The utility has to come in and make changes. One of the things that occurs during that discussion when they bring that permit into the building department is that the building official talks with the contractor about the specific needs to that house. It's going to vary depending on the age of your house, the age of your system, and any other complications if you have old wiring that needs to be brought up to code and some other issues. What my building department told me, or building department officials have told me, is that online that's virtually impossible. They can't ask those questions. They can't do it. Even within 24 hours, they need to be able to have those conversations. And at times, if it's a very complex case, they may not be able to get all those answers in a 24-hour period or get to it in 24 hours. 24 hours when it's in person is a lot easier than online. And some communities can do it. It kind of depends on the size and the capability of that community and the questions and, frankly, the complexity of the system you're trying to put in. If you're putting it in a very old system, it's very different than if you're putting this in a house that's 4 or 5 years old that has a brand new transmission.
So do you have a
line.
suggestion?
First of all, we have the bill no longer requires the online element because some of the smaller jurisdictions just said we can't handle that. So it is only the in-person application that gets the 24 hours. And I think the vast majority of homes, I mean, the cars can take a washer-dryer plug. It's so for the most part. And there may be some special circumstances, but the vast majority can be accommodated, and we want to be able to get folks that are buying a new car to be able to charge it at home as soon as possible. That's the goal of the bill.
Before the car runs out.
Well, that would be one.
And that's that's not a statute out there. That's a real car, right?
That's right.
That's right.
But we will continue to work with the League of Cities and the counties to make sure we get this as smooth as possible.
Ms. Pavley and then Mr. Rubio.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a need for some kind of transition period, but I appreciate the fact that when you buy an electric car, if you find out it's going to be weeks before you can actually recharge it at home, that's going to be a problem. Hoping maybe utility company or the car manufacturers may jump in and assist some of the smaller cities, at least in the startup. I mean, once it becomes routine, but as someone who knows a little bit about smaller cities, lots of times you have people who are under contract to come into City Hall a couple days a week. You don't have over-the-counter people. You have one. Not everyone can function and drop everything and put everything else to the back of the line while you go out and or deal with the charging, because we've always have long lines of people getting their house inspected for a variety of other issues. So I don't know what the answer is, but I know you'll work with the league on coming up with results.
We will.
So either a transition for cities under X number or something.
This bill has been double referred, so it does need to go to environmental quality.
For a short period of time or something. I think there'll be a sort of a wave of interest, and then it'll become commonplace and easy to understand and figure out and not too onerous. Or maybe some cities can collaborate together, because many times they're in close proximity to one another. It's just a huge difference depending upon the size of your building and safety staff and what you're able to accomplish.
That's exactly what we're hearing from smaller jurisdictions. They may only have one person in the planning department, and they may have other tasks. So we're going to get there. We are talking to cities and counties about how to, make the bill properly flexible, yet still provide timely installs for those folks that are buying electric vehicles now, and they are coming to California. They're on sale here now.
All right.
Senator Rubio, and then Vice Chair Gaines.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, I didn't turn it on. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Keogh, if the objective is to provide the ability for those who are buying electric cars to charge immediately, let me backtrack a bit. The current law authorizes but does not mandate cities and counties to require building permits. Why don't we just exempt the conversion, or the practice of being able to provide the outlet to charge the automobile? Why do we require a building permit? Why don't we take a different angle and say you don't need a building permit to do this?
This is at the home, and I think we would have a very vigorous discussion about that too, Senator Rubio, because there are electricity and safety issues. We want the installs to be done correctly. So I can talk to you a little bit more about that, but the essence of the bill is to keep the building permit process in place, but just kind of speed it up a little bit.
Perhaps it's for the League of California Cities then. For those cities that are authorized but do not mandate a building permit, what's the downside for them? Is there a downside? I mean, what's the trouble of not requiring a building permit for this particular action?
My understanding, and I'm obviously not a technician in this area, but my understanding is that the issue is going to be the electric load. One of the things the electrician has to do when they go and install the actual outlet, which is similar to a dryer outlet that you'd have in your house, is that each one of these new outlets is the equivalent of a new house on the line, on your transmission line in your area. So that's a huge new load.
Isn't that a question, though, not to interrupt you? That's a question for your electricity provider.
Yes, and your electrician, if they have to do a calculation that's based on the National Electrical Code for Electricity, they do that calculation. If the calculation says that you have to go and you have to meet with your utility, and they have to then look at doing infrastructure work on your transmission lines, that kicks into a type of building permit that you would need to get. You'd need to make upgrades to your line. You'd need to make upgrades to your home. And if you have a really old system, you're going to need to make upgrades to accommodate this new load in your home.
I must tell you.
In some cases.
In some cases, you may not, yeah.
I must tell you, with the cutbacks, many of these planning departments, resource management agencies, whatever you call them, have been significantly cut. And at the local level, I know they're trying to move funds to make sure that CPS workers can respond in 24 hours. I support the direction and the intent of the author. I strongly support it. Rather than requiring that timely turnaround, I just don't see why we rely on the energy provider to be able to make that calculation, and then you can email the final sign-off from the lead agency or local city or county just to prove it. Seems to be a more practical and easier way to get at the intent.
Senator Keogh?
Yeah, Senator Rubio, I think that your comments are very good. We are working with cities and counties right now. That's the statewide organizations, so the smaller jurisdictions will be represented in the discussion too. And I think we need to strike a balance between the safe and proper home installation that the new electric vehicle driver wants and an expedited process that's going to get them the charging station before the car runs out of energy. So I want to keep working on it, but I would like to keep the bill moving and make sure that The 600 electric vehicles that left Japan right before the tsunami that are coming into California very shortly, in fact, into Long Beach. We want those to be able to be sold and get out on our roads.
Senator Gaines.
Appreciate Senator Rubio's comments. Mine are similar, Senator Keogh, in terms of I represent 12 counties, and many of them are very rural, and I have real concerns about being able to process anything in a very short turnaround time. And I'm wondering is there an opportunity to put, it seems to me that the auto dealers have a real interest in wanting to get that installation in place quickly.
The car dealers?
The car dealers, yeah. And it seems to me that there ought to be a mechanism where they either work with a subcontractor who's qualified, or for them to take on that responsibility themselves and do that installation. But I'm not convinced that you need to issue a permit within a 24-hour time frame. I'm curious as to why that couldn't be done even after the fact if you've got someone qualified that knows what they're doing. For instance, I just got a new heat and air system installed in my house yesterday. I was amazed that they changed out 2 units upstairs and downstairs in 8 hours time. They had 8 individuals working very hard, and they did a great job. But I asked them about the permit. They said, "Oh, the city of Roseville will be by in a couple of weeks, and they'll check it out for you." So there was no sense of immediacy in terms of getting it checked out. Now I said, "Did you check the gas lines? I want to make sure there's no gas leaking." And they said, "This isn't the first rodeo we've been to." So that they are very competent in terms of what they're doing. And I think I guess my greatest concern is that these smaller jurisdictions that don't have the degree of staffing that some of these larger cities and counties would have are going to have real trouble meeting it. And is there a way, I guess from my perspective, that the marketplace can address this issue so that they can still be installed in a timely manner?
You make a number of good points, Senator Gaines. In the collaborative that's going forward in San Diego, and San Diego is not the only city, but the local utility, SDG&E, Nissan, and Ecotality, the installers, have done exactly what you suggest. They've identified local contractors that are capable of doing the work. The application is online for the purchase of the car. Of course, San Diego is a larger city, but the permit still has to go through a process, and we don't want to have the car dealer, the utility, and the installer all ready to go, but have the permit be weeks late. So the bill is aiming at kind of expediting that permit process. The idea of maybe a population threshold or conditional permit, we'll continue to explore that with those folks. But we do, the private marketplace is very vigorously participating.
Appreciate those comments. And again, it is referred from here to environmental quality, so we can continue to work on it. Senator Harman, did you want to?
I did have just a thought or comment, because I hear you, Senator, saying you're still working with the cities, you're still working with the counties. When is this going to be resolved and to your satisfaction and their satisfaction, if that ever happened? It just seems to me like I'm hearing that this bill's not ready. Is it going to another committee here on the Senate side?
EQ.
Yes, EQ.
And it's also fiscal, so it'll go to approps. This is the first policy hearing, and we have been talking to the cities and counties for a couple of weeks, but more needs to be done.
I think you need to ramp it up a little bit, and I like what Senator Rubio was saying. I'm not quite sure why this has to be done, and certainly in 24 hours, I'm thinking of small, little, rural cities. They won't have the capability to comply with this, is just my guess. But I'd encourage you to try to work out your differences with those two entities. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Senator Kehoe, would you like to close?
Ask for your aye vote.
Okay, we appreciate that, and as has already been stated, we've got another stop before appropriations. I think that the author has indicated her willingness to work with those jurisdictions that may be impacted. The fact is that most of this product is going to go in urban areas where people are well-versed with putting these systems in and want to facilitate them. So with that, I would recommend an aye vote. The recommendation is, the motion is to do pass to EQ. Is there a motion? Senator Pavley, and we'll call a roll.
The motion is due pass as amended and we refer to the Committee on Environmental Quality. Senators Desaulniers?
Aye.
Desaulniers, aye. Gaines?
No.
Gaines, no. Harmon?
No.
Harmon, no. Huff?
No.
Huff, no. Kehoe?
Aye.
Kehoe, aye. Lowenthal?
Aye.
Lowenthal, aye. Pavley?
Senator Pavley?
Pavley? Oh. Pavley, aye. Rubio? Rubio, aye. Semidian?
Okay.
So it's 5-3.
5-3, your bill's out.
Thank you.
That will take us to Senator Leno. Senator Leno is file item number 6, SB 223. Welcome, Mr. Leno.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. Thank you for your patience with my time in judiciary this afternoon. So it's a pleasure to present to you SB 223, which is a voter-approved local assessment. The bill is sponsored by the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce. It is strictly and merely authorizing legislation, and it is also specifically about local control and voter determination. And what it will do is will give authority to county boards of supervisors in California to decide by a 2/3 majority vote of that county board whether or not to let the voters of that county decide for themselves whether or not to restore their vehicle license fee to where it had historically been from 1948 until 1998, and that would be up to 2%. So as you well know, we're currently at 1.15%. That expires at the end of June. If we were to resort back to 0.65%, which is a third of its historic value, and if this were law, county boards would have that decision to decide whether or not to let the voters restore it up to 2%. They could raise it to 0.85, to 1.2, to 1.6, whatever they wanted to let the voters consider on their ballot. So it's all about local control and finally voter determination. So it really is a tool to offer counties, if they don't wish to pick it up, nothing will happen at all. If they do wish to pick it up, it has a rather high threshold. It was suggested that we might amend the bill to clarify that 2/3 for a county board of 5 is in fact 4 votes, and that is the intention, so I have no problem with that if anyone's interested. And then, of course, letting the voter speak. And at this time of ever-growing fiscal crisis, and with the state's finances looking ever shakier, I know that our cities and counties are going to be very desperate for some opportunity through the ballot to let their voters decide what the fate of their county should be. So again, if you believe in local control, if you believe in voter determination, this bill's for you. I'd ask for your aye vote. And I've got one individual who would like to present testimony who is about to leave town. So I'd like to introduce Jeffrey Hill from CSAC, who is in support of the bill.
Hi, thank you. Jeffrey Neal from CSAC, here to support SB 223. I apologize for not getting a letter of support in before the hearing, but we do support the bill. Counties have very little revenue-raising authority compared to the state and compared to cities, and yet they're the level of government, that level of local government that is responsible for the general health and well-being of California's residents. SB 223 allows each community to decide for itself which programs and services it needs and how to fund them. No doubt many counties, most counties, would have no interest in raising the revenue authorized under this bill, and they wouldn't. Some counties would like that revenue to provide services, and this would give them the authority to do so. The bill, as Senator Leno pointed out, still requires constitutional voter approval and requires an extraordinary vote of the Board of Supervisors as well. We support SB 223.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Other witnesses in support?
Steve Wallach on behalf of the City and County of San Francisco. We're also in strong support of this bill. The city is facing a $380 million budget deficit this year. That doesn't include the additional cuts that will probably be coming down depending on what happens at the state level. This will provide us an ability to seek voter support to maintain the level of services that the residents want. I'd also like to been asked to extend the support by Jim Lazarus of the San Francisco Chamber and Tim Paulson with the San Francisco Labor Council who also support this bill but couldn't be here this evening. So we urge your support.
Thank you.
And I'm Corey Marshall from the San Francisco Planning and Urban Research Association. We advocate balanced planning and policymaking throughout the Bay Area, and I'm here today to express our support for this measure as well. We're generally very supportive of different concepts that can be brought to bear, specifically with this measure, with voter approval, as well as it gives local governments more flexibility around how to generate additional funding, specifically around all the realignment proposals that are circulating at current.
Okay. Witnesses in opposition? Thanks, Corey. Mr. Urban, a more familiar position for you.
Gene Urban on behalf of the Alliance of Automobile Manufacturers. We're opposed for many reasons. The automobile industry suffered a cataclysmic collapse in vehicle sales in the last 2 or 3 years. We went from 16 million annually, nationally, to 10. We're crawling back up to 11 to 12. This doesn't help. The VLF may or may not expire on June 30th. The sales tax may or may not expire on June 30th. 1% sales tax. Another increment in the VLF. If it's a $30,000 vehicle, it's $500 or $600. That's not insignificant. You're punishing an industry that's trying to recover, that generates an immense amount of revenue for the state of California, and I would suggest this applies to our industry disproportionately. None of this revenue goes to transportation infrastructure. None of it. It goes to general fund. We have a transportation infrastructure financing crisis in the state of California. It may not rival that of the general fund, but it's a crisis. The excise tax is plummeting in value. That decrease is going to accelerate as the CAFE standards increase from 25 to 35 to 50 to 60 by the year 2025. The excise tax is going to be worth virtually nothing. There are not going to be any more bond funds. There's not going to be another $20 billion Prop 1B in the next few years. Our debt service is 7 to 8. It's going to 10 according to the treasurer. I don't see another big debt bond measure making it to the ballot or passing. Self-help counties are maxed out. They already tax themselves pursuant to a 2/3 vote to raise the sales tax to build infrastructure locally. 85% of the people who live in this state have already voted in self-help counties. The next largest county is essentially immaterial. It wouldn't raise much money. We are maxed out and facing a looming crisis. I would suggest that the next increment of VLF maybe should go to transportation infrastructure, not to the general funds of beleaguered local government. I get that. But there's a more immediate crisis, and those people who purchase vehicles should perhaps derive that benefit from them. A couple other points, and then I'll be quiet. We strongly believe that these measures should be applied uniformly. There should be no opportunity whatsoever to tax 8 cylinders more than 4 cylinders, to tax trucks more than 2-seaters. This bill doesn't do that. We fiercely oppose anything that would open the door to that type of discriminatory application as it relates to trucks, working families, vans, people who have more than 1 or 2 children. And lastly, I just think this is a mechanism by which this money can get back to the general fund. There's a statement in the bill that the bill should not be construed to somehow prevent the state from otherwise giving to the local governments what it would give. That can be changed by a majority vote. This money could easily end up right back in the state general fund because you simply don't remit to the locals that which would otherwise go. And to that extent, we are opposed.
Any other opposition? Senator Lowenthal? And then Senator Harmon.
I would just like the author to comment on the first point that Mr. Urban made. That is, should there be a linkage between the raising of the VLF at a local level and how that money should be expended? Should there be some kind of nexus, i.e. for transportation infrastructure, for some of the money or all of the money? Or do you see this as independent, really, of that, the way it is? And can you explain to this committee why you do?
Sure. I'm pleased to be able to respond to your question addressing one of Mr. Urban's three points of misinformation. So I'll get to the other two after I finish with this one.
I'm concerned about the other two.
Okay. With regard to this one, nothing in this bill prohibits just that. It gives the county board authority to decide, for example, in San Francisco, we have about a $100 million hole in our Muni budget for our city's transit operations. If it was the decision of the Board of Supervisors by a 2/3 majority vote to ask voters to raise their vehicle license fee by 50 cents and direct it to Muni, they could do it. It would require a 2/3 majority vote at the ballot, but that would be the board's decision. So it is local control, voter determination. Nothing in this bill would prohibit this money going for transit or transportation projects. So that was an incorrect statement by Mr. Urban.
And how, if it's a 2/3 vote by the Board of Supervisors, did you also say it's a 2/3 vote of the people, too?
No, per Proposition 218, so my bill doesn't address the vote thresholds by the public. Per Prop 218, when a revenue measure goes to a local ballot, a simple majority is required if it's for the general fund purposes of that local agency, a 2/3 if it's for a special use.
And so, okay, so then a general fund would be by the majority vote, and then
That's right. But again, up to the Board of Supervisors, finally up to the voters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Leno, as I understand the bill, an individual county can pass one of these assessments. Would that be right? Will that result in some unfair competition problems between auto dealers, for instance? Someone is in Orange County. Well, let's reverse it. Let's say Los Angeles County passes this kind of an assessment. Orange County does not have this kind of an assessment. So if an Orange County resident goes to Los Angeles County and buys a new car from a Los Angeles County dealer, is the tax determined by where the car is sold or where the registered owner lives?
Where the registered owner lives.
Could somebody game the system and say, look, I live in Orange County. I'm not going to pay the LA County
Not only
tax.
has this been considered, there's actually a term for it. It's called leakage.
Leakage.
And
Thank you.
Mr. Wallach, I think, has some more information on this. But the memory I have of the leakage problem, there was a similar situation in the state of Washington relative to Seattle. Something like this was tried. Maybe Mr. Wallach will correct me. But in any case, the leakage problem, as it was termed, is quite minimal. It's probably a phenomenon that might happen, but minimal.
All right.
Insignificant, minimally insignificant.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Steve Wallach on behalf of the City and County of San Francisco. It's similar to how the sales tax is applied to car sales. It's by the place of where you reside, not where the transaction takes place.
That's the good answer.
Well, that leakage term is used in sales tax by cities and say, look, my city, Huntington Beach, lost the sales tax because somebody bought their new car in, another city. But here we'd have a situation where one jurisdiction has the tax and one does not. Will there be any impact on that because of that?
Well, actually, the sales tax analogy is a good one because everyone still has a 0.65 or until the end of June,
right,
a 1.15. It's a voter-approved local assessment. It's just an assessment on top of whatever the state already has. And again, I forgot to mention, this is at no cost to the state. Wording in the bill requires that any expenses incurred by the state will be reimbursed by the county.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Any other comments or questions? Mr. Leno, would you like to close?
Thank you. I'll just be very brief. Again, from Mr. Urban's comments, you would understand that this bill proposes raising someone's vehicle license fee. It does not. And so if Mr. Urban's client wanted to make their point. If this bill or law, he would have more than one opportunity. The first would be a County Board of Supervisors hearing to urge them not to put this on the ballot. If he failed there, it'd be every opportunity to convince the voters that this was going to be detrimental to the local automobile sales or whatever the argument might be. But again, to have one industry tell you the voters should be silenced at a time of crisis when counties, as you heard from CSAC, have virtually no opportunity to adjust their budgets to what we, the state, are doing to their budgets, I just think is inappropriate. And finally, let local electeds have authority to let the voters make the final decision as to what they want their local environments to look like. I would ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Leno. We need a motion to do pass to Government and Finance. We have a motion? Moved by Senator Lowenthal. We'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Senators Desaulniers?
Aye.
Desaulniers, aye. Gaines?
No.
Gaines, no. Harmon?
No.
Harmon, no. Huff?
No.
Huff, no. Kehoe?
Aye.
Kehoe, aye. Lowenthal?
Aye.
Lowenthal, aye. Pavley? Pavley, aye. Rubio?
Aye.
Rubio, aye. Simidian?
Aye.
Simidian, aye.
That's 6-3. Your bill is out. Thank you, Mr. Leno.
Mr. Chair, committee members.
Takes us to our last bill. Senator Correa, you have one bill up, as you have pulled one of your two bills. This is file item number 8, SB 290, Neighborhood Electric Vehicles.
Thank you, Chair. I do have one bill to present today. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and Senators. In 2007, the legislature approved Senate Bill 956 that I authored to authorize the use of neighborhood electric vehicles, or NEVs, in a ranch plant community in Southern California. That year represented the peak of the real estate market, and since then, as you know, residential construction has not done well. Part of that bill required that there be a report back to the legislature of the experience of these NEVs. Well, because of the crash in real estate market, the initial grading in this project that was a subject of SB 956 did not begin until last year, and so because this project has not been completed, we cannot report back to the legislature on the experience of NEVs in this project. So what we're trying to do in this bill is essentially extend the reporting deadline until November of 2015 and the sunset date on this bill to January 1st, 2017. Merely stated, what this bill does takes into consideration the fact that we need more time. I ask for an aye vote.
Thank you. Witnesses in support.
Steve Lamar, representing Rancho Mission Viejo. This is the planned community owner, developer. Very excited still about the opportunity to include neighborhood electric vehicles in the project simply because of the market. We won't have any residents until 2013, so we are requesting your support for the bill so we have an opportunity to incorporate them in this new planned community and report our experience back to you later.
Move the bill. Thank you. Any witnesses in opposition? There's a motion from Senator Simidian. Would you like to close, Mr.? Is there any other comments or questions?
Ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Senator Correa. The motion is to do pass to appropriations. I'll ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Senator Desaulniers?
Aye.
Desaulniers, aye. Gaines?
Aye.
Gaines, aye. Harmon?
Aye.
Harmon, aye. Huff?
Aye.
Huff, aye. Kehoe?
Aye.
Kehoe, aye. Lowenthal?
Aye.
Lowenthal, aye. Pavley?
Aye.
Pavley, aye. Rubio?
Aye.
Rubio, aye. Simidian? Simidian, aye.
Your bill is out, Mr. Correa, and look forward to having a discussion with you on your other bill. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senators.
All right. So I will ask the clerk now to go back through and we'll get all the items that were put on call. And if the clerk could just mention the chair's vote and the vice chair's vote, that would be nice.
The first item is the consent calendar. The current vote is 6-0. Chair, aye. Vice Chair, aye. Senators Harmon?
Aye.
Harmon, aye. Kehoe? Aye. Kehoe, aye. Simidian? Aye. Simidian, aye. That is out 9-0.
It's out 9-0.
File item 1, the adoption of the committee rules and policies. The current vote is 6-0. Chair, aye. Vice Chair, aye. Senator Harmon. Harmon, I. Kehoe. Kehoe, I. Semidian. Semidian, I. That's out 9-0.
9-0, that bill's out.
Bills are adopted.
The bills are adopted.
File item 2, Senate Bill 28 by Senator Semidian. The motion is due pass to appropriations. The current vote is 6-0, or 6-2. Chair, aye. Vice Chair, no. Senator Harmon? No. Harmon, no. Okay, so that's 6-3. The bill is out.
6-3, that bill is out.
File item 4, Senate Bill 209 by Senator Corbett. The motion is due pass as amended. The current vote is 6-1. Chair, aye. Vice Chair, no. Senators Huff? No. Huff, no. Harmon? Aye. Harmon, aye. 7-2.
That bill is 7-2, that bill is out.
File item 5, Senate Bill 211 by Senator Emerson. The motions do pass and refer to environmental quality. The current vote is 4-0. Chair, aye. Vice Chair, aye. Senators Harmon? Aye. Harmon, aye. Kehoe? Lowenthal? Pavley? Semidian? It's 5-0. 5-0, it's out. 5-0.
5-0, the bill's out.
File item 10, Senate Bill 341 by Senator Lowenthal. The motion is due pass to the Committee on Appropriations. The current vote is 6-0. Chair, aye. Vice Chair, aye. Senators Harmon? No. Harmon, no. Kehoe? Aye. Kehoe, aye. Semidian? Aye. Semidian, aye. That bill is out 8-1.
That bill is out 8-1.
File item 13, Senate Bill 720 by Senator Runner. The motion is due pass and we refer to the Committee on Appropriations. The current vote is 6-0. Chair, aye. Vice Chair, aye. Senators Harmon? Aye. Harmon, aye. Kehoe? Aye. Kehoe, aye. Semidian? Aye. Semidian, aye. That bill is out 9-0.
Bill's out 9-0.
We're done.
And that's it. Thank you, everyone. We are adjourned.
Thank you. Yeah, you can thank